year that Lake Mead is filled to capacity. These bathtub rings evidence a few things. They evidence overallocation, climate change, and population growth. Essentially more straws trying to suck from a finite resource. Las Vegas, speaking of straws, is a really interesting example. You know, of the 7 states, Nevada gets the least amount of water from the Colorado River. And with that water, it flies in the face of reason. Las Vegas is super, super, super efficient. I mean, you think of the Bellagio and you think of all of their water features and you think, yes, that's not to say that they use their water in very big, dramatic ways, but it's one of the most efficiently run systems in the United States. First of all, they realize that their driver economically is tourism. So they'll allow certain uses of water, like at the Bellagio, but no one else can have a fountain in their home, or there are very strict restrictions on what you can do as a resident or as a business. The Southern Nevada Water Authority, the local water provider, recycles every drop and sends it back to Lake Mead to count as credit toward extracting more water. They have a turf replacement program where they'll pay you to remove your turf grass, which is a water-intensive crop. So they have a lot of super, super innovative water efficient approaches that you might not be aware of. One interesting thing, speaking of straws and how dire the bathtub ring situation is, Las Vegas had 2 straws or pipes that pulled water from Lake Mead and delivered it to the city. One of them is completely above water now. It is almost never submerged. So that's, offline. Another one is in danger of being offline. So to the tune of billions of dollars, just a few years ago, they completed the 3rd and final straw from Lake Mead to pull water to the municipality. So you've got the 7 states and you've got all of the challenges that we're facing. And even though it's an antiquated agreement, the Colorado River Compact, it seems to work. There are flare-ups, and you've probably heard about some disagreement with Arizona recently, and there have been and there will continue to be Supreme Court cases that have to figure out who gets which water. But over almost a century, this compact has held up pretty well. Now, the story of Mexico is what I'd love to wrap up my presentation with, and then I'll open it up to questions. As I said earlier, Mexico was a kind of a late addition to this compact, but deservedly so. Mexico and the state of Sonora and Baja California rely on river water for agriculture and also some municipal use. So over the last few years, I think objectively you might say US-Mexico relations have not been their best. And the reason I like sharing this story is because it bucks the trend of tense relations between the United States and Mexico. In 2011 and 12, there was a negotiation overseen by the International Boundary and Water Commission between the United States and Mexico. And it created something that is worth celebrating on many levels, especially on an environmental level. It was called Minute 319, and minute is just the section in a long government document that references what was called the pulse flow. And this was a release of many, many, many acre feet of water from Lake Mead through Morelos Dam, which you see in the picture here. This was a US-Mexico delegation, including myself, that I'll tell you a little bit more about. But this is at Morelos Dam, which is where the Colorado River is dammed at the border to Mexico, between Arizona, Yuma, Arizona, and Mexico. And there was a pulse flow. They opened the floodgates, literally, and for environmental and social benefit, just let the water run in. It dramatically impacted the Delta, the river Delta, and the town of San Luis Rio, Colorado, which in its name San Luis Rio Colorado, it has the name of the Colorado River in it, yet since the 50s, the river had not flown through. So this was the first time, if you can imagine, generations of people having grown up and never having seen the namesake of their city. So socially, it was a huge benefit. Environmentally, it brought back plants and restored habitats, even if it was not permanent. But it showed that what a difference that cooperation can make. So much so that in 2017, another minute to this binational agreement was signed, and that, back to the bathtub rings, is aimed at addressing that issue. The agreement says that Mexico can hold its water in Lake Mead until it needs it. So not only does that, enable it to control its access to its water allocation more, but it maintains higher levels of water in Lake Mead. And it this minute also spells out some cooperation and investment and technical guidance that the U.S. will give to the city of San Luis Rio Colorado, and to Mexico generally, to improve efficiency. So, oh wow, One World, One Water Center plugged into this initiative a few years ago in two ways. One of which was Denver Botanic Gardens was enlisted to design a master plan for water efficient botanic gardens in San Luis Rio, Colorado. And so that is in the works, and hopefully should come to fruition in the next year or two. But it's a beautification project, but it's also a community education and just a societal and environmental benefit to the city of San Luis Rio, Colorado. And then the other element was that OWOW would consult and advise in other beautification and greenbelt projects in San Luis Rio, Colorado. One interesting element to the Botanic Gardens that hopefully will come to fruition there, and to the beautification projects, they would take water that would have otherwise come from the Colorado River, but has been reused and treated by the municipal water authority there, with technological investment from the US government and US states. And that would reduce the need for freshwater sources in the Colorado River to be used. And so it plugs into that ability of Mexico to leave more water in Lake Mead. So I just like this story. It's a feel-good story. Not to say it's gone perfectly. There are political snafus, and some of the projects have been delayed because of new administrations on both sides of the border. But it gives us hope that there is collaboration internationally on water issues. And that really brings us back to OWOW and what the purpose of the program is. It's this acknowledgement that we can't rely on one group of people, the biologists or the hydrologists, to solve our water problems. It has to be the political scientists, the social scientists, the teachers, the journalists, the farmers. So anyway, that's what OWOW is about, and I would be happy to answer any questions that people might have on the Colorado River, or on Denver Botanic Gardens, or on this program, the One World, One Water Center.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I feel like I learned a lot, and I wrote down a few questions as well. But one of the ones that we have in here is, do the Denver universities do rooftop rainwater harvesting and gray water for landscaping?
Yes, it was only a few years ago that the state legislature allowed for water capture, because it goes back to the downstream water rights. Colorado was not allowed forever until just a few years ago to capture rainwater. So now residentially, you can have two 55-gallon barrels to capture rainwater and use that in your gardens. And there are options to incorporate rainwater capture into industrial and business gardens as well, and for agricultural use. But there are still quite a few constraints on capturing rainwater, because really it is a downstream right that Colorado has to respect.
Hannah, do you want to ask the next question?
Me?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you have heard of this, and it's okay if you haven't, because I could ask a follow-up question. But are you familiar with the former state representative Wes McKinley in Colorado?
Maybe by name, but
Okay. So
not
he
particularly.
is down in Welsh, Colorado,
Okay.
and he was a former state representative. He wore cowboy boots, you know, every day. He was a Democrat, but he campaigned on a donkey all across the southwest of the state. And he has currently been working to kind of get to the bottom of large corporations buying up water wells in different parts of Colorado from Georgia. And it can be a little conspiracy theory-esque when you kind of chase it down, but he has very comprehensive evidence and data to suggest that these corporations are buying up these wells to then create a giant aquifer, and then a different state, you know, people in different state would then own Colorado's water. And I'm sure I'm not using the right terms, and I'm sure I'm not explaining it the way an expert would explain it, but could you just speak to either that case or more broadly, like how can you buy water, and how do we allow corporations to do that?
I'm not familiar with the details of that particular case, but it is not uncommon for foreign entities or even out-of-state entities to buy water rights, whether it's explicitly or implicitly, in another state or another country. Several examples. Water, yes, you can extract it as water, but you can also extract it and embed it in other products for export, like food. So a good example is Arizona. Saudi Arabia is a huge investor in land, arable land in Arizona, and they irrigate crops there and, you know, export back to Saudi Arabia. Or Australia is a great example. Countries from around the world, many of them from the Middle East, are doing the same thing, buying up land. And, you know, it's a short-term, perhaps win-win, in that, you know, people in the given country or the given state can make a profit on selling their land. But long-term, you wonder, are you exporting, you know, your most valuable commodity, water? So yes, and gas and mineral extraction, same thing. I mean, if farmers can't make a living by growing food on land, but an oil or gas company is willing to pay them, you know, for the water rights on their land to extract minerals instead, or to frack, you know, that's a short-term win for the farmer who sells his land, but long-term, you've lost control of water rights. So it's, you know, water lawyers will forever have employment, because
Yeah.
there's always something, you know, someone taking your water, and it's always contentious. And, you know, the need to collaborate is always going to be there.
Can you talk about the, also we got another question, very important. They were wondering if I'm related to Gwyneth Paltrow. I'm not.
Oh, oh, that's a good question.
No, not related to Gwyneth Paltrow. But can you talk about the use it or lose it law in Colorado?
Yeah.
And I know that
Yeah.
is Colorado specific.
Yeah, it is specific. I mean, other states may have it, but it is specific to Colorado. I spoke earlier about beneficial use. And once you have your water right, like let's say Denver Botanic Gardens, Chatfield Farms, our 1862 water right, if we don't apply that water every year to our crops or find some beneficial use for it, we could lose it. And then, you know, someone else, you know, would inherit that right and go to, I mean, it's a long, involved process. You have to go to court, water court, and prove that it's not being used, and that the, you know, that the person who owns the right is not putting the water to beneficial use, and then they can lose it. So that's the use it or lose it that's built into our system. It's, it's such a scarce commodity, water, that it's not a huge problem, but it does happen.
And you run into situations where, I mean, this might be anecdotal, but, farmers have you seen situations where farmers will just kind of let it flow and if they don't need it for their crops, and it would just be
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
water running down
use
the.
it or lose it kicks in over a period of time. I think it might even be a decade. Like,
Okay,
because
got it.
there will be drought, and then there will be a rainy season, maybe an abundance of water. It's not just, oh, you missed that season, too bad, we're taking your water right. It's your average use over
Okay,
a period of time. And I think it's like as long as a decade.
okay.
It's a fair amount of time that you'd have to not be utilizing your water right.
Okay, I'm going to ask one of the questions from the chat. It says, all the water humans use is water not available for native plants, wildlife, replenishing aquifers, and the like. As a member of the Center for Biological Diversity, I'm most concerned about water for native plants and wildlife habitats. If you can, please speak to more natural areas, native plants, and wildlife along the Colorado River.
Oh yeah, well, amen to that. I mean, working for Botanic Gardens, yes, that's where we focus. I mean, yes, urban ag and agricultural efficiency is a concern, but native plants and habitat restoration is something that we are very focused on. I can give some examples that are evidence of or a result of the joint venture between MSU Denver and Denver Botanic Gardens. A tributary to the South Platte runs through our Chatfield location, and our location, it was previously it is a flood zone, and it was set aside when Chatfield Reservoir was created to prevent further floods. There was a catastrophic 1960s flood. So Denver Botanic Gardens Chatfield Farm was created when this reservoir was there. But I mean, there had been civilization there. There was an old homestead, and there was farming there. But so it had been kind of taken over by the Army Corps of Engineers, and the water that had flown through there had just been kind of channelized. So our research team and our ecologists, with help from students and faculty at MSU Denver, reintroduced oxbows and worked in harmony with the beavers. There are beavers there on site. Beavers play a very important role. They slow down the water flowing. So there are natural dams, but there are also artificial little, simulated beaver dams that try and reintroduce the natural flow of the river. So that's just one example, but transplanting native plants back into those environments has been a big focus. So yes, watershed health is what we're aiming for here. Yes, if we can sustain, humanity and everyone who depends on that water, and still focus on water quality and environmental health, I mean, that's what we're striving for.
That's an interesting question too, thinking back to what you said about when you opened the dam and saw this recovery in the habitat. I think that is such just an amazing example of that question.
Well, if I can just add, from one year to the next, we saw water retained there, which then stimulated more plant growth and more habitat. We have cute little images of, nighttime cameras capturing everything from beavers to raccoons to, other kinds of wildlife. And the plants that were able to grow there, because the water didn't rush through, it stayed and hung out for a while. And it triggered more native plant growth. We saw that within 1 year.
That's incredible. So I personally have a couple quick questions. One is, you've talked about sort of the court rulings around water and the fact that Las Vegas spent to the tune of billions to make this new straw. And I wonder, that's already the case. And I wonder, as climate change continues to impact our water sources and water scarcity, I had read about a case in which the plaintiff had said that access to water is a human right, and that water has rights, and so that you could sue from the perspective of a body of water. And I wonder, just in your work and in your research, what do you think is the future for us in policy, or just people on this call, no matter what we do? Where do you see that going in the future?
Those are fascinating angles to water. Is it a human right? And does water have its own rights? And like in India, the Ganges River, I mean, does have rights. And there are other bodies of water that are, that they have that power that the government has acknowledged, is owned by them. And there was a movement in Colorado it didn't really go that far, but no, that's not, unprecedented. As far as water being a human right, that is definitely something I think we're going to be seeing more and more discussion on. Years ago, the CEO of Nestle got into a lot of hot water for claiming that water was not a human right. He was a little misquoted on how he presented that, but he also was sitting at the top of a corporation that's known for its bottled water and the millions and millions of dollars that it's making on extracting groundwater and bottling it. It forces more thought and conversation on, if you don't place a value on water and just everyone take as much as you need, there is concern that the people who truly need it and the amount they need for their basic survival, they won't have access to that. So, if there's not a price or a value put on it, then who will value it? That there are all kinds of fascinating philosophical, sociological, religious, economic, environmental. I mean, when I teach a class called Communicating on the Environment at MSU Denver, that's how I start every class. Water is a fill in the blank issue. It truly, it is an everything issue. And when I speak with kids, I encourage them to stump me, like come up with an issue that's not a water issue. And some kid will say, oh, space travel. Well, of course that's a water issue, because the reason we're exploring space is to figure out how we survive when we run out of water. So, everything is a water issue. I wholeheartedly believe that.
We're going to ask a couple more questions just because, time, we don't want to take up too much of your time, even though this is all fascinating. Sorry, I had it. It said, wait, nope, sorry. I had it.
I think I saw it. It was about botanic gardens not displaying native plants. Was that it?
Oh, no. Does Denver send treated wastewater down the Colorado River?
Yes. There is no such thing, obviously, as new water. So, yes, all water that is sent downstream is treated. I mean, people can call it what you want, dinosaur pee or whatever, but yeah, there is no new water. So water is recycled again and again and again. But water that is treated and released back into, any river system in Colorado is treated to a very high standard.
The last question I see here, I am going to make it a little shorter, Denise, because we're a little short on time and because Jennifer can see everything that you've typed. But in short, I think she's wondering, for Oh Wow, do you all include in your message the importance of everyone planting native plants and pollinator habitat from extinction? And all issues are water issues, I have learned tonight. And so I guess the question is sort of, what role does that?
So native plants and, well, biodiversity is a message we focus a lot on. And, just like in society, we talk about the benefits of diversity in the plant world and the animal world. I mean, biodiversity is key. On an agricultural side, I mean, if you don't have biodiverse crops, they will be subjected to, like rust with coffee. If there's a Arabica coffee is not very biodiverse, so it's very susceptible to pests or to disease. And so coffee as we know it could be wiped out pretty quickly. So our director of horticulture, that's her specialty, biodiversity with coffee crops. So very important work, but even not on consumable goods, just native habitats. Biodiversity is key. I mean, we talk a lot about pollinators and what are the plants that are going to attract pollinators, and what are the ecosystems that support those plants. And I mean, the interconnectedness is what we spend a lot of time focusing on at Denver Botanic Gardens. And a lot of botanic gardens, and I see this as part of a question, I think botanic gardens have a varied history. They're scientific institutions that most of them focus on collecting plant specimens and presenting those to the public and archiving them in the form of plant samples in a herbaria like we do. Now, most of those scientific institutions are concerned with preservation, conservation. And we have a whole research staff that is dedicated to just that, making sure that habitats survive and their native plants thrive. Now, there are display gardens as well, and those are also botanic gardens. And historically, some of those have been, more focused on native plants than others. I mean, yes, we have a tropical conservatory at Denver Botanic Gardens, a dome under which just tropical plants live. And no, that is not typical of Colorado, but is it an opportunity to educate the rest of the world? Educate Coloradans and visitors on what you might see in other corners of the world? Yes, but our focus is native plants and water-wise horticulture and agriculture.
Great. So we are going to wrap up with the last question that we sort of ask some iteration to everyone, and then I'll turn it over to Bridget and Hannah to wrap up. But I have learned so much. I have been equal parts, I think, inspired, but also maybe a little terrified of kind of the situation, which is how I am most of the time with climate change. But for those of us on the call and for people watching this, what is one thing that we can all go forward and do to help your work and to help water security? What is a simple change that we can all make in our lives to be as part of the solution?
Learn about your water. Learn about where it comes from, how much of it there is, what's the quality, who's using it, who's using how much. Just start learning about your water. It's something that's so easy to take for granted until you don't have it or until it's not of a quality that is safe. So just educate yourself on water.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming on, and Hannah as well for coming on and talking about Environment Colorado. Thank you all, everybody, so much also for joining and watching Conservation Conversations and getting in on the discussion as well. I would just say, if you like all of the work that we do, donate to Environment Maryland, Environment Missouri, Environment Colorado, and Oh Wow in the Denver Botanic Garden. Hannah or Kate, do you have anything else you want to add?
If everyone is at home and not wanting to turn their computer off, which I'd be surprised about because everyone stares at their computer all day, we, Environment Colorado, along with other organizations, are hosting a panel tonight at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on the Dark Waters documentary, which highlights the water contamination, but just general contamination that PFAS causes, which is a forever chemical found in different firefighting foams and on your pots and pans. So Mark Ruffalo is actually the one that plays the lawyer in this movie, and it's also I think Anne Hathaway was in the movie as well. Don't quote me on that. But this movie came out, and they're doing a Q&A about the movie with the actual lawyer that was working for the corporations, and then kind of figured out what was under the underbelly of these corporations, and ended up being the lawyer that helped uncover this tragedy. So I will link that in the webinar as we finish up. But that's all I have. I really appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks so much, and we'll direct you to OWOW's social media and Denver Botanic Gardens social media. Follow them to see more of their great work. And thank you all so much for joining. We really appreciate it. And Jennifer, thank you again. That was amazing.
Thank you so much. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye.